IDW Sonic Comic Issue 5. Why the hell is the story wasting a bunch of our time lazily recycling all of the panels that foreshadow that the main villain was an Eggman so far? I got it the first time. It's trying to be epic, but there's a reason no Sonic comic has ever done this before. You don't want a whole chunk of the issue and the first impression of it to be completely expendable with nothing to talk about. If it wasn't going to end off with showing us who the real villain was, then this should have been put somewhere else. And what were they thinking having a roll call page? I hope this isn't every issue from now on. I don't want to look at all of it. That's just a spoiler. Good thing we would have seen SBO right away anyways. And he appears to be alone with Sonic, and they're fighting badniks. It would make sense for there to be a bunch of stories dedicated to a character meeting and talking to each main Sonic game character if said character was like an original character with a new personality that could have unexpected things in common with each one and interact with them based on who they are, having unique opinions of them. They could be getting to know each other for the first time, and the two of them would have their personalities on full display. That's what the whole plot of Sonic Battle did. Different character every chapter. Tangle isn't the main character of the series, but this kind of formula would work a lot better if Tangle was with Sonic from issue 1. Instead, Sonic already knows all these people because IDW is too gutless to have him meet them at a different time than in the games, for no reason at all. It wouldn't change anything. So the only interactions he's been having with the characters past Amy are that they're fighting badniks and redundantly commenting on the fact that they're getting more organized. At that point, couldn't Sonic meet up with a bunch of characters at once and have the exact same plot where they're fighting robots? Blaze could be here too. But then Sonic would have no reason to bother with SBO swinging him to get him up to the top of a metal loop. SBO's sharp metal thing attached to a rope goes into some metal loop after Sonic stops even trying to run in on the loop. And after Sonic says they've got to get into the swing of things, they hold hands and, it looks like a helicopter, but you can see blue circles in a bunch of parts of a circle, and SBO's more in the center if that purple spot is him. So that's supposed to be SBO swinging Sonic around. The artist definitely could have drawn that better. I'll always appreciate the creativity of the combination attacks. I've never seen this before. Now why can't the plots be as creative as these? What took so long for us to see these? Did he expend all his creativity on coming up with the combination attacks and call it a day? Normally that'd be insane. A writer doesn't have to be less creative in one area just because he came up with an interesting idea in some other area. But this is a writer so unmotivated to be creative that the first couple stories have been literally just Sonic fighting robots. If I wanted to see that, I'd play a Sonic game. But I'm reading a comic book. They don't even seem to be fighting in a town this time, where there'd be civilians to protect and collateral damage to prevent. They're only defeating them to make sure they don't get to a town, so it's given up and not even trying to have stakes this time around. Now they're just above a pine tree forest, like they're in Hilltop Zone, complete with a blue tint over the grass below. I'm glad it's not called Hilltop Zone though, because that means it's still kind of a new setting. Like it might still have a new name. IDW may just consist of towns and fields for now, which we've all seen before in Sonic, but it's still technically new and original settings because they don't have recycled names. So it is technically a whole new world we're seeing. The potential's there, but we're not getting it. I don't even know the name of this place. If this was STC, there'd be a text box in the corner of the first panel saying the name of it. How about Blue Forest Zone? And we're never gonna learn how this metal loop is here. Did somebody make it? Why? How is he supposed to know that anyone would actually be able to... I guess it wasn't made so that people could run on it, and some people were just lucky enough that they had the ability. Was it just built and put here by an abstract artist? As a sculpture for no reason? Or was the natural chaos energy of the place magically able to generate it? This is probably the first time I've seen something like this in an actual comic book. Like this specific kind of winding loop from Emerald Hill Zone. And it's not even going to be explained. Anyway, Sonic reveals that the Chaotix have been trying to track down Eggman. How do they expect to do that? How are they managing to do that? Eggman vanished. That'd be before there could have been a tracking device placed on his person, which he might have discovered anyways. After all of the stories where Sonic believed Tails that Eggman wasn't behind this, all of a sudden Sonic says that Eggman's up to something big again, just so Espio can contradict him. It's not hard to keep a character consistent. Espio says they began their search in the ruins of Imperial City. Ruins? That's surprisingly dark. The Chaotix found Eggman's last known lab. Aw, it was sweet how Cubot was interacting with Charmy. Wow, Espio wasn't kidding when he said Orbot and Cubot were cooperative. Either Cubot's high-fiving Charmy or playing patty cake with him. This might actually be the cutest Charmy's ever looked. This is how Eggman giving his robots total free will can backfire. He'd go ballistic if he saw this. And we see Vector holding Orbot, who knew nothing. And there's some words calling him lazy. He was always working hard in Sonic Boom, and I didn't mind. Eggman's computer system had shown no escape plans or personal traffic, and he seemed certain he'd win the last battle, go figure. I'm getting sick of the fact that there's washed out art in a tint just because it's a flashback. That gets tiresome to look at after a while. Searching up Eggman's other bases just had them dealing with robots. I like seeing Charmy have fun riding on one of the motobugs, even if I already saw someone ride one before. It's nice of Sonic to say that the Chaotix are the best detectives he knows. He asks Espio why he called him out here if they haven't found Eggman. Espio says that they sorta did, as they're standing on what seems to be functionally the same type of platform that was in Hilltop Zone. The only reason it doesn't seem like the exact same place is that they're so much higher up, and everything below them looks like a pine tree, while in Hilltop Zone it was mostly grassy fields to walk around in, with only a few pine trees in the background. Espio says he received an anonymous tip that led him to the village he's taking Sonic to now. Sonic complains that he could have just skipped ahead right away to "I'm taking you to Eggman," and I totally understand Espio on this one. He wanted Sonic to understand how hard the Chaotix had worked. Considering how much effort they went through for nothing, it kinda makes sense that he felt like telling him about it to vent. I thought the Chaotix were gonna be competent and actually learn where Eggman went themselves, not just get a lucky anonymous tip. That could be from Eggman himself for all they know. Blaze is competent in this comic, and the Chaotix were competent in the Forces prequel comic, so having them be bumbling detectives who just get lucky every time would be out of place in this comic. It's not like it's a Sonic X comic, which at least had a focus on trying to be humorous. At least that comic seemed interesting and creative compared to just fighting robots to defend towns the comic. Every plot was different. That's what the newest Sonic comics do to me. They make everything before them look good by comparison. Sonic nicely says, "Duly noted," and is paranoid because everything looks fine in this town. At first it was impossible to tell who was talking to Sonic because the artist rushed the art so that everyone was in silhouette. Charmy's happy that Sonic made it and is thankful that there's lots of kids his age around and tons of mountain flowers. And they have the best honey tarts ever. I like how positive he's being. He's not being annoying. He's being cheerful and energetic in a positive way. At least his character seems to be the best it's ever been here. But seriously, the panel where everyone was in silhouette, that's a lot more unacceptable as the first time we're seeing these kids. It should have been after we saw what they looked like. Sonic high-fives one of the kids, and Charmy says that Sonic hasn't met the big guy yet, and Eggman walks out of the house wearing a different outfit and says that they call him Mr. Tinker. He asks to shake Sonic's hand, and Sonic asks him if he really thought he'd buy this act. At least I can't accuse the comic of thinking we'd buy this act, because it gave away that he was still planning to take over the world at the end of the previous story. So it's not trying to mislead us anymore after that. Because if he was really good, he wouldn't have been saying something while standing outside someone's window. Because that's him talking like he's still a villain with a hammy evil plan. I'm completely baffled that nobody around here immediately recognized Eggman when he took over the world in the past. His face would have been put everywhere. This is the definition of an idiot ball on the part of everyone here. They could be reasonably fooled if he claimed he was Eggman's identical twin. But even then, that'd be such a convenient lie, and raise the question of why it took until now for anyone to discover his identical twin. He would have been famous a lot earlier for speaking out against Eggman. Nobody's acting like they're afraid of him. And nobody's calling him Eggman. Eggman says he doesn't remember much of anything, so he's faking amnesia. At least the artists make him look ridiculous with his clothing is helping you want him to go back to normal a little, so you won't have to see him like this anymore. It's better for Eggman to help villagers instead of cause trouble. He doesn't have to be made to wear a pink and green outfit to do it. There's already a guy out there sending robots to towns anyways. But it's understandable that since he's the main villain of the games, he won't stay in this position, because no other villain could have as much of an impact as him as the main villain. Never mind that Neo Metal Sonic made a big impression as a villain in the games too. So I think he could work just as well in Eggman's position for a long time if he's no different than him anyways. It'd be really insulting to my intelligence if I was supposed to believe Charmy didn't think he was Eggman, and wasn't even claiming he was an identical twin. So if there was good writing here, he'd be simply playing dumb to try to preserve the masquerade around these kids, who are being made to think he's just Eggman's twin. Why aren't they all saying he's Eggman's twin? I was always aware of the possibility that these guys think all humans look alike, so they assume that while he looks somewhat like Eggman, he can't be him if he's acting nice. But this is a guy who once took over their planet. His face would have been the most recognized face ever by now. Why is Sonic wasting all this time reminding Eggman of how he used to bother him? Isn't it immediately obvious that even if Eggman does have amnesia, he might be better off making sure he doesn't remember who he is and return to normal? Because if he's only acting good from amnesia, he might go back to normal if he remembered his real identity out of pressure to conform to what he's known for. This reminded me of one of the problems with the Iron Dominion arc that I'm not sure I thought to point out at the time because there were so many other problems distracting me. When Eggman went insane and lost his memory, the heroes could have all agreed to make sure he didn't remember who he is, but instead everyone kept calling him by his current identity, including Chuck, who ended up returning him to normal because of it. They could have easily not talked to him at all, but instead they felt like venting at him at every opportunity and it backfired. They could have tried to act nice to him, make him think they were friends. The Chaotix could be doing that here, and it'd be better writing showing an improvement since Archie, at least for this one measly story. Vector enrages me by insisting to Eggman that's all a case of mistaken identity. Again, if the writer was writing well right here, this would only be Vector lying to Eggman and trying to make sure he doesn't remember who he is and go back to being evil if he is amnesiac, and lying to the kids so they won't freak out and make sure he stops fixing things. There's no reason for the kids to think he's not Eggman, come on. But if the Chaotix knew this was Eggman all along, SBO would have had no reason not to brief Sonic on the fact that they were pretending to believe Eggman's act in front of the kids to make sure he wouldn't try to blow his cover. So the real idiot ball here is that SBO didn't tell Sonic what was going on before he met him, because for all he knew, the minute Sonic would see Mr. Tinkerer, he'd try to spin dash at him. Vector even tells Eggman to get back to what he was working on. Is this supposed to be proving that he's taking advantage of him? Or is this supposed to be written to make you laugh? Because it's horribly failing. Making characters stupid is a common attempt at humor, but it's not a safe attempt at humor by any means. That's the biggest thing that ruined the reboot for me. Too many times where characters are made so stupid that they're impossible to relate to. The Chaotix are better than idiots. I know they can be a genuinely competent team because I've read Archie and Fleetway, so they have no reason to buy Eggman's act. Wait, they immediately go to talking amongst themselves with no indication that Eggman or the children left. I guess they did, but they should have been drawn as walking away first, like in the background. SBO says that this is what he meant when he said that they sort of found Eggman, and Sonic asks if he's sure it's not an act again. And Vector says that they thoroughly interrogated him and observed him for a couple of days. Yep, the Chaotix do totally buy this act. It's legit, he remembers nothing. Fuck you, that wouldn't happen. I'm just thinking about what a genius Fleetway Vector was. Fleetway Vector would make a device that could find out what Eggman's memories are to see if he's really amnesiac or not. He had to laugh to himself. Sonic wastes a bunch of panels remembering Eggman, and Vector says he called Sonic because he has no idea what to do. He doesn't want to punish Eggman for stuff he doesn't remember doing. And Sonic seems to appreciate seeing him acting nice. Well, we were already spoiled at the end of last issue that Eggman still wants to take over the world, so at least we won't have to feel disappointed by the inevitable Captain Obvious twist that it is an act. But knowing it's an act for sure isn't going to stop me from pointing out how cowardly it is of the writer to not have him actually have amnesia. There's no reason to not give Eggman amnesia for real for a bit. It could be explained as a device of his malfunctioning. He could have been trying to give himself a photographic memory. But how could the device do the opposite of what it's intended? Like, it could be because he doesn't know as much about how the brain works as he thinks. Maybe it'd make more sense if Tails gave him amnesia with an amnesia ray he built. If Eggman did have amnesia, that'd be the comic doing something new. But instead, it's just another time where Eggman pretends to turn good to trick people, like in AOSCH and Fleetway. So the whole thing looks like something that clearly could have been more interesting than it is. Now, it's just a waste of time that drags out because you know it's a trick from the start. And it's the most frustrating of all here that he won't stick to it, because he's been at this for days now. So you'd think he'd be at this long enough to learn that he could still have a happy and fulfilling life without wasting time being evil just because status quo says so. He can get used to this too, and other people are getting used to it. Wouldn't it be nice if this was how Eggman would end up spending his last years alive? Espio does have a brain, even if he's spiteful here, saying that Eggman should be punished. And Sonic says, but would you really say that's Eggman? So Sonic does buy his act? What happened to the genre-savvy protagonist? There's no proof that he's telling the truth. It does make sense to want to use Eggman for good instead of just executing him or keeping him in jail. At least this way he could do some good. But of course it'll make the heroes in Village look stupid later on, because they could have easily just shot him and avoided a lot. After we see Eggman sewing up a teddy bear, the mayor shows up and says that Eggman appeared in the village without warning, and nobody is sure how he arrived. They locked him up immediately, so good, they actually weren't as idiotic as possible. The next day they found out he'd broken out, just to reinforce his own self. Wouldn't it have been nice if we found out how the hell he broke out? No, that'd be effort. That'd be interesting. He said he had done what he could for the hinges, but they'll need an entirely new deadbolt. He was questioned and tested for days and never showed signs of his old ways. This is probably being written to show how brilliant and smart and determined Eggman is, that he didn't screw up once. And yet the Metal Virus arc, from what I've heard, will completely go back on that, and only happened because Eggman was a complete and utter moron and failed to do something other versions of him did on the first try. I don't know what this comic wants. He's clearly way smarter than Boom Eggman here. I can imagine Boom Eggman would have slipped up eventually. The mayor says that once the village realized he wasn't himself, they nursed his wounds and took him in. He had wounds? It didn't look like it. Wouldn't they have nursed his wounds as soon as they put him in jail? So Eggman repaired anything that was brought to him. You know, Tails could have been doing all this too. Good thing it was stated that he was going to make repairs to that town and help the locals rebuild, so he was stated to be doing engineering like this too, but it was all off screen. It's ironic that Eggman's being shown to be using his engineering for good way more than Tails in this comic. I can barely remember Tails' engineering in the reboot either. Eggman also fixed the windmill, and at least the mayor admits that he's a terrible man and heard stories of him. Sonic complains that it was simpler when Eggman was evil. Vector says that he could stick around to keep an eye on him, and Sonic says that's just delaying things, so they better figure things out before it's too late. I'd say make Tails make a device that shows the memories he has. But no, Rick and Morty really made me see how not overpowered the genius engineers in the Sonic series are. They don't make nearly as many inventions as you'd expect, and there isn't much variety. And it's more realistic that way, having a person specialize in something, but it's also less interesting. So Tails just sticks to planes and one fake emerald. Then a civilian runs over to them, saying that badniks are coming in from the south. He just conveniently knows they're from the south, in particular, instead of just saying that badniks were where he was running away from. Sonic tells the Chaotix to head the badniks off while it wastes time talking to Eggman some more. Like that worked the first time. He says the gig is up and insults him. Why is he wasting his time? I thought he stopped. Eggman's shown hiding and acting like he's too afraid to fight. This is all more proof that he's faking and trying too hard to keep up an innocent act. Or even if he did have amnesia, the fact that he was thrown in jail and questioned would have proven to him by now that he used to be evil anyways. He could build a robot to defend the city just fine, but doing that would make people suspicious of him, so he can only go so far trying to help. He'd have to be outright sent to another universe to actually be as much of a hero as possible. And I guess he'd want to go back to try and take over the world anyways. Sonic humors him and wastes time pointlessly bouncing off trees because the artist wants to give us something interesting to look at to make up for the story, which is kinda cliche and boring. The heroes fight robots, speaking of boring, and Charmy defeats the flying camera bot that lets someone watch what they were doing, because he's strong enough to defeat it just by doing that. The villain asks why Sonic and the Chaotix were there, meaning it can't be Eggman because then he'd already know. We didn't need to see this. If it was Eggman, it would have had a point to being shown, but it wasn't. Sonic pets one of the rescued animals. Charming falls on Vector's head for no other reason than for the writer to force comedy, because he's acting nice otherwise. And Sonic totally buys that Eggman was scared of his own robots when there's no proof he's not acting. But it's still sweet to see Sonic shake Eggman's hand, apologizing for getting him mixed up with someone else, and say they'd like to start over with them. So even if he did turn good, this would happen. Eggman does slip up eventually because he says he'd love to show Sonic Eggman Land once it's completed. I'm sure that the only reason he's written to say that is because he's referring to something else that seems harmless, like a little toy city. But it's stupid of him to even do that and just risk people being suspicious of him and prove that he still wants to run a city. After he spent days not giving himself away at all, him being so obvious now just seems like an idiot pull. And the story ends with Shadow saying he'd destroy Eggman before he'd ever build Eggman Land again. I'm guessing he won't destroy him though, because that required guts and get rid of the main villain of the games. And I'm guessing the next story will be all about the heroes protecting Eggman for the good he's doing now, when obviously Shadow killing him will be much better in the long run. So why am I expected to root for anyone but Shadow here? At least both sides have an equally good point, so the heroes aren't being total idiots. But still, it seems like the next story will just be a frustrating waste of time. Something that you might actually be better off skipping. It already gave away what the whole story would be like by ending off showing Shadow here. If the heroes weren't idiots at all, they put a bomb in Eggman when he's asleep that could be made to blow up with the press of a button if Eggman goes back to being evil. Or fine, instead of a bomb, it could paralyze him. Like what happened to Tassel Boy in the reboot. Tails wouldn't put a bomb in Eggman, but he could at least put a paralyzer there. But no, for once his sweetness would backfire, because even if he was asked to do that, he'd probably refuse. Or maybe not. The Chaotix are just assuming he would refuse. You'd think they'd send SBO to ask Tails to build a paralyzer just in case he'd say yes. There's no reason not to try. If Tails was more of an anti-hero, he would have just nipped Eggman's future plan in the bud after being contacted by SBO. Rick would stop him immediately if he was in the series. I guess I'm supposed to think that everyone in the town all at the same time is too stupid to come up with the idea that in case Eggman goes evil again, they should have the ability to press a button to stop him. That gets harder to believe the more people are involved. They'll just have some chip inside of him. By the way, if Shadow spin dashed Eggman right away instead of wasting time talking to him, Sonic wouldn't have had the time to notice him and plan on stopping his plan. So the only reason Shadow didn't simply spin dash Eggman in half right away was that for some reason he felt like standing still on the roof and listening to Eggman and Sonic talk for a while, instead of immediately going to attack. Well, I'm under the assumption that he only decided to try to kill Eggman after he mentioned Eggman Land. That would make sense because it'd explain why he didn't go spin dash at Eggman earlier. Did he just show up on the roof and only heard him mention Eggman Land? Because wouldn't people on the ground have heard him walk on the roof and looked over at him? This issue is by Ian Flynn, and was about Eggman pretending to be a good handyman in a town near Hilltop Zone, and Sonic finding some robots again, while Eggman pretends to be scared of them. And people think Eggman has amnesia. But the story isn't treating its audience like gullible idiots at least, because we were clearly shown that Eggman's got an evil plan before this. Sure, all he said was that soon he'll be fixing everything, but he still said that in a menacing way. He still acted like a hammy villain by saying that plan to himself. My point is, Eggman actually having amnesia and being good genuinely will be the comic doing something new and slightly interesting. So because this comic consistently refuses to be like that, I know this is a waste of time and he'll stop having amnesia even if he did have it. This is the kind of thing that has to be pointless because of what character it involves. If this was some other villain, then it could be permanent. What pissed me off about the story is that even all of the heroes end up believing his act, including Sonic. Sonic could humor him without believing him, and that'd be sweeter. It does make sense that they'd believe what they want to believe, because they want it to be true, so they're convincing themselves that it is. But still, they know him better than this. It is nice that Eggman's fixing stuff for the villagers, but I know he'll go on to do at least one screwed up thing that'll make this look sad in retrospect. When he could have easily learned his lesson from this valuable life experience that he can clearly still have a happy life like this. I guess he's just faking being happy the whole time. Also, what is the name of this town? Who's gonna want to talk about the town that Eggman pretended to be good in? Who's gonna remember the exact numbers of the 2 issues this town was in? This is a town that stands out. So why does this place not have a name?